Know about how Americans feel about what President Obama calls his #1 priority, that is jobs. According to polling by political consultant Frank Luntz, half of Americans, 50%, are not sure what Washington will do when it comes to job creation. Well, Frank Luntz is also the author of What Americans Really Want, really, and we mean it this time. He's also president of the Word Doctors. Frank, good morning to you.
Good morning.
50% say there's no direction. That ain't good.
Well, that's the problem. If you don't know what the tax policy is going to be, as your previous interviewer discussed, you don't know when it's going to get voted on, how do you plan for the future? How do you decide who to hire, when to hire them, when to make investments? And that uncertainty, the lack of stability, is what is frustrating small businesses and why the American people just aren't creating the jobs that are necessary to put people back to work.
The frustration for small business is something we hear time and again, Frank. The next poll asks what issue should be the top priority for Congress and the president. People are allowed to pick two answers now.
Yes.
Job creation came in first, 35%. Federal budget and debt came in second at 33%. There are your two clear winners, followed by cutting out the wasteful spending at 28%.
And here's what's interesting. You add the federal budget deficit and debt and cutting wasteful Washington spending, and what do you get? A public that is absolutely outraged by what Washington is spending, how they're spending it, and the fact that so much of their money is being wasted. That's the frustration. And that's why you've got the Tea Parties. That's why you've got all these marches on Washington. And frankly, Bill, why Congress is at its lowest job approval rating almost ever.
Well, the next question, this is a long one, too, so let me give the proper setup, all right? People were read two quotes from two very different presidents with views on the economy. They were then asked which one they agreed with more. They were not told who said what, but we'll spill the beans right now. The first one was from Ronald Reagan. It read in part, "We who live in free market societies believe that growth, prosperity, and human fulfillment are created from the bottom up, not the government down." Now, the second from President Obama, "The choice we face is not between a government-run economy or a chaotic and unforgiving capitalism. Rather, strong financial markets require clear rules of the road." Now, you found 57% of the people agree with what President Reagan had to say. 43% say they like what President Obama had to say. Explain that.
It's amazing to me, and there's also an aspect of this. The economic freedom that Ronald Reagan preached is still preferred today to the government oversight that Barack Obama is talking about. The American people still want to reach for the stars rather than be protected from the ground. And Reagan's quote came very early in his administration in 1981. Obama's quote came in February of his administration in 2009. And the public still believes in hope and opportunity as expressed by Ronald Reagan, even more than the government intervention as communicated by Barack Obama.
Then explain this and tell me if there's any difference in the next one. The next question, people read a quote from President Obama, basically taking Republicans to task for being the party of no. Listen to it and react.
You know, if you can gum up the works, if you make things broken, if the Senate doesn't get anything done, well, that's consistent with their philosophy. It's a whole lot easier to say no to everything. It's a whole lot easier to blame somebody else.
All right, so then you asked this. People didn't seem to like it. 68% disagreed with the president's premise. 32% did agree, Frank.
It's correct. You've got 1/3 of Americans that are absolutely solidly behind Barack Obama. But the reason why his numbers have fallen so much is that a majority of the public doesn't believe in the politics that he is practicing or the ideology that he is preaching. And to simply accuse the Republican Party without providing a discussion of the alternatives that they are proposing, the American people are saying, stop, enough is enough. Look, we've looked at these numbers very carefully across all the demographics, across all the ideology, and it explains why so many people, so many Americans want a change in their government, why you see the public saying, I've had enough of Washington, I've had enough of incumbents. There's an economic expert, Greg Hyman, who has been studying this, and his conclusion, I believe, is correct. The American people look at their situation right now. They believe they can do better. They believe the last 4 years are unacceptable, and they want change for the next 4 years.
Well, one final question here. I'll squeeze this in quickly. People read a couple of statements for and against the stimulus bill. They were asked which statement they found most persuasive. 59% agreed that the idea that with unemployment rates still above 10%, that the stimulus bill has failed. 41% think that the stimulus package saved or created about 1 million jobs, which is the mantra you get normally from the White House. It's not perfect, but it was better than doing nothing, they say, according to the 41%.
Right, and once again, you've got that base, but it's a minority of the public who agrees with the strategy that the Obama administration has followed. Let me emphasize, because viewers pay attention to polling very carefully. There is a large segment of American society that does agree with what Barack Obama is saying and doing, but it is a minority of the population. A majority says that there's too much waste, too much spending, too much fraud, too much abuse, and they desperately want to change. By the way, it's Greg Hayman, not Greg Hyman. The public is saying to Washington, and this is where the political impact comes into play, if you don't make a change, if you don't stop spending, we're going to stop voting for you in November. And that is a message that every politician should take to heart.
Frank Luntz, thank you. Interesting research with us live in New York.
This is a story we brought you over the weekend.